Welcome to our third family history class. This one is called FamilySearch Research Wiki Maps and History. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see the same thing that I see. Okay, today we're going to begin and we're going to learn about all of these great resources that will help you in your genealogical research. One of the first things I wanted to point out is a website developed by computer science students at BYU and their professors called the Family History Technology Lab. They have created some programs that allow us to visualize our tree and to do interesting things. They actually even have games that you can do with your family tree. The one I wanted to show you today is called Relative Finder, which is here in the top left. And some of you may have even used this site before. Relative Finder, you can log into your family search account, and Relative Finder will match your tree with their groups that they have on here. So they have groups of entertainers, prophets, sports figures, signers of the Declaration of Independence, and you can see if you are related to any of those groups. Additionally, you can create a group, maybe for your ward or your family home evening group, and see how you're related to each other. So this is a fun little activity that you can do. Okay, let's get down to our research. This first slide has to do with locality. Now, beginning this series, I usually recommend that you focus on one family in your family tree, and that family lives in the 1800s. And the reason I do that time frame is a lot of the records for the 1800s are online. And as you do all of these steps with that one family, you will learn some interesting things about the family and about the resources available. So think about one family that you're working on that lived in the 1800s and identify where they lived and the time frame they lived there, and think about what historical events occurred during their life. And then we want to know, where would the records be for this family? So finding the correct location is really important. If we don't have the correct location, we may not be able to find the records that we need. So it's important to know the location that the events occurred at the time of the event. And so many times this will be the historical location. I have a map of the United States here from 1789 to 1790. And you can see that it looks different than our United States map now. And even some of the states look a little different, like Virginia and Georgia. The boundaries are different than what you would expect. And as you can see, we don't have some of the Western states that we do now. Now, knowing that this is what the boundaries looked like during this time frame will help you identify where your family lived. For example, we can see that Virginia has a different shape here. Later, part of Virginia was taken off, and we have Tennessee there as part of the area. We have Georgia here. We ended up with Alabama and Louisiana. So knowing where somebody lived is going to help you find the records. Up here, notice we have the Northwest Territory. Many times before a state became a state, it was part of a territory. This slide shows the Northwest Territory zoomed in a little bit, and you can see it's the black area. The Northwest Territory later became 6 different states. Now let's say that I have an ancestor that said he was born, or at least it's listed on FamilySearch, that he was born in 1800 in Ohio. If I look at this little map and chart, I can see that Ohio did not become a state until 1803. So that would be incorrect. I would need to change that to say that he was born in 1800 in the Northwest Territory. So it's very important that I get the correct location. And as you can see, I have a list of different years that these states became states. So it's important to know when the state you're working in became a state. Also, it's important to know when the county you're working in became a county. Here's another historical map showing some of the boundaries, great things. What if I had an ancestor that said they were married in Missouri in 1803? Well, I can see that Missouri did not exist in 1803. It was part of the Louisiana Territory. So I should say that that ancestor was married in the Louisiana Territory as opposed to Missouri. So make corrections as you find them. I'm going to show you a couple of resources that can help give you the information on when a state became a state and when a county became a county. This is a book called the Red Book, and you may find it at a genealogical library. In fact, I'm sure you would find it at a genealogical library. There's also an older version online at this URL. But this book is arranged by chapters, and it contains a chapter for every state. And in that chapter, it will include a map, a modern map of the county, and it will have information about the history of that state and when that state became a state and when the county became a county. There's a second book that is very similar to this one called the Handybook for Genealogists. And this one also will be found at any genealogical library, but there are a couple places where it's found online, the older editions. And it has the same information or very similar to the Red Book that we just saw. However, the additional thing that is in this book that I do like is it contains some maps of trails. And I like looking at these maps of trails because it helps me. Here's a picture of one. It helps me identify where my ancestors lived and how they got from one place to another. And you can see we have a whole bunch of trails identified here. This book has minimal information, but it does list the names. For example, let's say that you have an ancestor that lived here, and somehow he got to this area, or Greensboro from New Bern. How did he do that? Well, you can find the map or the trail. Here's Jonesboro Road, and identify that that's likely the place or the trail they took. And then do a search on Google about Jonesboro Road and find out the history and when it was used, during what years, and who were the people that used it. It will give you some interesting information. So I really like the possibility of looking for these trails. Okay, here is looking inside of the book. Here's a chapter on Arizona. It gives some great information. It tells us that it was a territory. It became a territory in 1863, and it became a state in 1912. Knowing that if you have anyone on your family tree that says they were born in Arizona or died or married in Arizona, if that event occurred before 1912, it should be listed as Arizona Territory and not Arizona. So make sure you have the right location listed. This book also has a section on societies. I highly recommend that you identify a couple of genealogical or historical societies that might be assisted, that you might be able to use as a resource. These historical societies and genealogical societies are often run by volunteers, and their purpose is to preserve records of the local area. And so they may have records that are not available at any other location. But in this list, in this particular book, you might see that there is a state society, or maybe there is a county one specific to the county that you're working in. So I would suggest you identify them and maybe contact them if you're having trouble finding the information you need. In this book, we also have a list of the counties within. We're still looking in Arizona. And so here we have some counties: Mojave, Navajo, Paiute, Pima. And if we look next to them, we actually have a date of when they were created. So Mojave was created the 21st of December, 1864. Navajo was created the 21st of March, 1895. This one tells me that it was created from the Apache County. So again, if I have an ancestor that lists that they were born in Navajo County in 1890, that would be incorrect. I want to make sure I would have to list it as Apache. I want to make sure I have the correct county. So not only do we want the correct state or territory, we also want the correct county. So it's important to get some maps. This one map over here on the right is a modern map of the county boundaries. This one on the left is a map of the territory of Arizona and shows you the boundaries there. I suggest that you find a map contemporary to the time when your ancestors lived in a location. This will help you identify the correct boundaries. I will show you some other resources here. We have, this one is the Phillimore Atlas and Index of Parish Registers. So this is for British countries. And this is actually religious jurisdictions. Again, you need the correct jurisdiction to get access to the record. Next, I have some websites that you could search online for historical maps. The first one is the David Rumsey Historical Map Collection. They have historical maps not only of the United States, but of other parts of the world. And they have contemporary maps. We have the Hargret Library Rare Map Collection. This particular map on the front here is a map of Atlanta. Isn't it fun if you could actually find a map of the city? This was an early map, so you can see the city was much smaller than it is now. Here we have the Library of Congress map collection. Again, there's all kinds of maps here. Not only do they have historical maps, but they might have maps of waterways, topography maps, and other kinds of maps. The next one is the Perry Castaneda Library Map Collection. And you can see the list just right on the front page is very international. So you should be able to find a historic map for the location you're looking for. And then if none of these seem to work, or if you're having a hard time navigating the websites, you can always do a Google search for a historic map. Okay, let me tell you about this little problem. This is one of my own family. It's a research problem, and the first person here is, is John Burton. He's the father of the family, and he was born in 1795 in Kentucky. He was married about 1819 in Girard County, Kentucky, and he died in 1843 in Clinton County, Missouri. So we can see that he migrated from Kentucky to Missouri, west to Missouri. And I have a historic map of Missouri here. And the boundaries, as you can see, there are fewer counties in Missouri than there are currently. So Clinton County, Missouri does not show on this map at this time, but it's in this upper northwestern area of the state. Now I come through his daughter, who is named Nancy Jane Burton, and she was born in Clay County, Missouri, which is this yellow portion in the far left. She was born in 1831 and she died in 1858 in Gentry County. And Gentry County is not showing at this time. But what I wanted you to know is, in reality, what happened is John bought a farm and a lot of property around the farm and lived in one place once he arrived in Missouri. So he never moved. So how do we have him dying and his daughter being born and dying in different counties? Well, this is how it happened. Here I have a boundary map of 1830. And again, you can see this is the area we were looking at, Clay County in the upper left. But within Clay County, you can see the white in the back. That shows you the modern the modern county boundaries, but you can see we also have Clinton County here and we have Gentry County here. So at some time during those years, the boundaries changed around the family farm. So they never moved, but the boundary changed multiple times. So knowing the name of the county at the time of the event will allow me to find the records in the correct county. Okay, let's go ahead and go to FamilySearch.org and look at the Research Wiki. The Research Wiki is a great resource that I use it all the time. I think it's one of the best resources that very few people know about. So let's go ahead and show you some things about the Research Wiki. If you go to FamilySearch.org, search, and then the last option on the drop-down menu is Research Wiki. The Research Wiki has a search box here. You can search by location, which means you can search by country or state. You can also search by topic, but we're going to begin with searching by state or country. So every country has a home page. The first country I searched for was England. And I want you to take note of the layout because the layout will be the same from country to country. So we have England here, and we have some country information. And under this paragraph of country information, it actually tells me when it became a country. And so here we have 1770, the Kingdom of England joined the Kingdom of Scotland. In union became the Kingdom of Great Britain. The official language is English. Below that, we have a getting started section with some resources, how-to guides, how to find birth, marriage, and death records, research strategies. Then we have England research tools, gazetteers. A gazetteer is a place name dictionary. So it helps you find places where they're located. England, here's a county list for England. And then in the table on the right, we have a map. We have a section for beginning research. We have a section for record types. Now, these record types will be genealogical records specific to this country. And in this case, it's England. And if you're not familiar with all those records, I suggest you click on them and it will give you some information about those kinds of records and how to use them in your genealogical research. Now, if I scroll down the page, I will get a map. And in this case, it's an interactive map. This is a map of the counties of England. So I could click on any of these counties and then it would take me to a page for that county. In this case, it would be Yorkshire. Or I could use the county links below. And you can also see on the right that I have the rest of the table. So the rest of the records, the genealogical records, I have a section now for England background. And I would like to point out to you the history one will be a good one to go to. This will give you a historical timeline so you can figure out what was going on when your ancestors were in this location. If you're working in a country that has a language that is other than English, you would want to click on the language tab or the genealogical word list they will have. And that will help you read records in that language. Next, we have a section on local research resources. And this is where you have a list of societies. Remember, I showed you those two books that have a list of societies. Here also, you will have a list of societies. And I recommend you look at those societies and identify some that might be helpful to you. Here we have, as we scroll down, more research strategies for England, more tools, and we even have some online lessons. These are video tutorial lessons that you can watch for free. If you click on, for example, the church records over here, it takes you to a page about church records. And as you scroll down, it will give you information about church records. It tells us about the religions in this country, and then tells us about the types of records in this country. So we have baptism records, It tells us what information we would expect to find in these baptism records, and it shows us an example. I've typed in now a different country. This one is Italy. Again, we have information about the country. Here we can see that Italy became unified in 1861. We have the section on getting started. We have a section on research tools, and this is where we have a genealogical word list in Italian. But there's also one for Latin, French, and German. Some of these languages will be used in Italy in different locations. We have record samples that shows us how we can translate a birth document, a marriage document, and a civil death document. We have in the table to the right, we have the beginning research section. We have our record types again. And as we scroll down, we will have more there. I clicked on, I think it was ethnic records, and this one shows us some Jewish records in Italy and tells us the kinds of records that are there and what they might contain. Here's another country, the Czech Republic. Again, similar layout. This one also has under the research tools a jurisdiction boundary map. So it will help us to identify when the boundaries changed. Now I've gone to Missouri, which is a US state. And if I look under Missouri information, it tells us it was the 21st state and became a state in 1821. And it was a territory prior to that time. Here we have the getting started section, and under the research tools section, the first thing listed is the boundary changes for Missouri counties. Remember, I showed you that boundary change for the counties. This is the map that you can do that. You can pull up a different year and see what the boundaries look like. And we have the same table on the right. Okay, typically these are the topics that are covered in most of the states and countries. However, if there's something specific and unique to that state or country, it will also be listed. Under Missouri history, we have a timeline here. It tells us what is going on there. Again, using that timeline and looking at your family to see what's going on may give you some ideas to help you understand what impacted the family during their lifetime. I clicked over here, vital records. This is a list of vital records in Missouri. Now, every state has vital records. However, they have different years in which they began keeping these vital records. So knowing when these records were begun or when they're available is really helpful. So clicking on vital records and looking under birth, marriages, and death, this is what we find, that in Missouri, birth records began in 1883 and went for 10 years, and then they stopped. And then they began again in 1909. This helps me to know when I can even look for a record that might be available. If I have an ancestor that was born in 1881, I know that I'm not going to find a birth record for them, so I will need to look for something else. The general compliance means that by 1927, every county in the state is keeping these records. Prior to that time, between 1909 and 1927, not all counties were keeping these records. But that's how you would use this vital records section. Here, I clicked on State of Missouri Census, and Missouri actually took some state census records. And here we have territorial, colonial, and state census records. Tells us the years, and it tells us what areas or counties were covered. And it also shows us where we can access these records. Clicking down here under Missouri background, I think it was archives and libraries. This tells me what's available in these archives and libraries. Here we have an online resource, the State Historical Society of Missouri Digital Collections. This is actually a great resource. If you have Missouri ancestors, they have birth records and death records online that you can search. Then they have a list of these repositories and libraries. The Mid-Continent Public Library has some great resources for research in that state. Again, here's another one, cemeteries, and I have a list of links for cemetery records in that state. Another option, this is a different state now, Illinois directories. If you don't know what these are, that's okay. You could learn about them by clicking directories in your state, and it shows an example and tells you what kind of information would be in there. Here's one on immigration and immigration. Sometimes states have more information. This might be New York, actually. Here we have New York passenger list. We have Liberty Ellis Foundation, Castle Garden, and we have some links to other online databases. Here we have New York Gazetteers. They give you the information for book and film, but it looks like these links are all online. Land and property in New York, again, collections. Now, I want you to know that FamilySearch in their research wiki, when they list collections, they don't just list collections that are available at FamilySearch, but they list collections available anywhere. And as you look at this list of online resources, you'll notice that some of them have a $sign. This means it will take you to a website that is a subscription website. So it might be Ancestry, but it might be some other site. Others are free. This one says it only has images. It may give you more description like this bottom one here. Here we have newspapers. Newspapers are great if you can find them online. Here we have Genealogy Bank, contains this particular New York Weekly Journal between the years 1733 and 1751, and many other collections here. Periodicals, probate records, again, these have to do with death, wills, and estates. And societies, I mentioned societies before. Here we have some state societies, and down below we have some regional ones. And many of these societies have websites that you can visit. You can also search the Research Wiki by topic. So here's an example, US Census records. It tells us about the census records, where we can find them online. It also tells us about some other census schedules, different than the population schedule that we can look at. Maybe you have Native American ancestry and you want to figure out how to research that. You can do by topic. So this is Native American. And we have some links to sites and we have some other featured information. Tracing LDS ancestry. Here are some great databases for research, Pioneer Ancestry. Military records, I like this one. This is specific to US, but if you have ancestors in Denmark, you can also search Danish military records. For the US military records, you'll notice that it has a list of wars here in chronological order. You can look to see which, maybe your ancestors were involved in one of those events. You see the time range, and maybe you can figure out that maybe some of your male ancestors participated in those events. And if you want to find out more about any of these specific military events, you would click on the link. Homestead records and many other records. This will give you some detailed information on those records and where you can find them and what kind of information may be in them. Okay, that was a lot. I hope that you will recognize that using the FamilySearch Research Wiki, even before you begin your research, is a great resource. Going there and finding out about your country or your state is a great way to begin your research. We'll see you next time.